Well, welcome, dear friends. I'm Father John Deere, and welcome to this Beatitude Center Zoom session with our very special guest today, Dr. Catherine Meeks. You can find out about many other wonderful upcoming Zooms at www.beatitudecenter.org. First, let me remind everyone who's here live on the Zoom to go ahead and please mute yourself if you haven't, and to write any questions or comments for Catherine in the chat link. I hope Catherine Meeks will speak for at least 45 minutes, and then we'll open up to questions and comments and reflections for 45 minutes, and in a few days, we'll send out the recording link. So, dear friends, let us begin with a prayer. And so I invite us to take a moment of silence. And if you'd like to just take a deep breath and notice how you're feeling today. And let's all together enter into the presence of the God of peace, who loves each one of you infinitely and all of us unconditionally. And let's welcome the nonviolent Jesus here into our hearts and ask for all the graces of peace, love, and nonviolence for ourselves, for the whole human race, that we may welcome God's reign of peace and nonviolence. Beloved God, thank you for all the blessings of life and love and peace that you give us. Be with us now. So we pray, especially today, with the whole world for the gift of peace and an end to war. But bless us as we reflect with our friend, Dr. Catherine Meeks, on your call to follow the nonviolent Jesus, to practice equality, inclusivity, justice, nonviolence, and peace, to be people who hunger and thirst for racial healing, and so to do our part to end racism, segregation, prejudice, discrimination, war, poverty, environmental destruction, every form of violence. Inspire us, energize us, and send us forth, beloved God, that we might do your will and live out your beatitudes and speak out and take action against war, poverty, racism, and injustice, that we might be your beloved sons and daughters, your peacemakers who welcome your reign of universal love and total nonviolence here on earth. In Jesus' name, amen. So welcome again, dear friends. I was just saying that this week, my new book, The God of Peace, a commentary on Matthew, Mark, and Luke from the perspective of nonviolence, is coming out, and you can order a discounted copy on the website beatitudecenter.org. So thanks for supporting my book and telling your friends about it and my upcoming tour. I'm really pleased and delighted and honored to welcome my friend, Dr. Catherine Meeks, who I consider one of the nation's leading Christian voices for racial healing, much less disarmament and peace, and who will share with us on hungering and thirsting for racial healing, a new way to see the journey. And needless to say, we're far from the racial healing and peace and nonviolence that Jesus, to Dr. King, envisioned and called us to. So, as you know, Dr. Catherine Meeks is executive director of the Absalom Jones Episcopal Center for Racial Healing in Atlanta, Georgia, where she organizes and holds spiritual retreats and workshops on a variety of wellness and spirituality and healing issues, and offers courses on Jungian psychology, racial diversity, cultural issues, and spiritual development. She does that locally, nationally, and internationally. So check out her website at centerforracialhealing.org. Next week in Atlanta, they're going to premiere a new documentary about her center's work called The Story of the Center for Racial Healing. Dr. Meeks received her doctorate from Emory University, where she focused on Jungian psychology, African and African-American women's literature, with a dissertation on Zora Neale Hurston and Alice Walker. Wow, I'd love to read that. She taught African-American studies at Mercer University for 25 years and worked for the mayor of Macon, Georgia, leading his youth violence task force, and then taught for 9 years at Wesleyan College, where she also served as the founding director of the Lane Center for Community Engagement and Service, was the director of Aunt Maggie's Kitchen Table, a family resource center. She was the founding member of the Center for Racial Understanding, which organized citywide marches against violence and community wellness fairs. And she's author of 8 books and a bi-weekly column in the Macon Telegraph. Her latest book is called, with a beautiful title, The Night is Long, but Light Comes in the Morning. And last year, she was awarded for her lifetime work, the Lifetime Achievement and Service Award at the White House. So it's a great blessing to welcome this great teacher of peace and healing and equality. So please join me, everybody, in giving a rousing show of hands and a silent welcome to our friend Catherine Meeks. You're very welcome here, Catherine. Talk to us.
Thank you.
Just the floor is yours. I'm going to mute myself now.
All right. Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you. And I would just make one tiny correction. The ceremony for our awards was actually here at Morehouse College in Atlanta, but it was the Biden Award. So I have the president's signature and a little medal with the president's shield on it, or whatever those shields are. Very proud of that and was very surprised by the whole thing. So I want to talk some from my book. I'll hold it up so you can see the book that Father John just mentioned to you, the latest of that came out last year. And next year in February, my memoir, which is titled The Quilted Life, Reflections of a Sharecropper's Daughter, will be out. You can now buy it, pre-purchase it on Amazon if you have any interest in looking into that. It helps you to understand how I got to here this day by reading that. So I want to read a little bit from the preface of this book and then tell you a little story and then get into the kind of the heart of what I'd like to say. And I certainly hope that you will have questions and comments, because I think that when we have a conversation together, that works better than just having somebody talk to you and go away. So please be thinking of, as you listen, pardon me, as you listen, please be thinking of what is stirred up for you. The house is on fire, and it's time to stop standing around debating which fire extinguisher is best. It's time to pick up one and begin working to put the blaze out before the house burns to the ground. This book of meditations on racial healing offers one such tool. We have arrived at the place in our shared journey where we are allowing conspiracy theories, distortions of history, fear, and outright lies about race, and many other cultural challenges to determine the quality of our lives together. These are damaging and will continue to fuel the fire until we choose to stop it. Though issues surrounding race have existed since America's founding, and the inability of some to see all of God's children as equal has permeated history all over the world, we seem to have found ourselves in a defining moment in the long journey, and it's up to us how we intend to embrace it. We can stop for a moment and reimagine the way ahead, or we can choose to continue as we have been. When we decide to make true progress, we'll need to re-examine many of our narratives and seek to find deeper clarity within ourselves as participants in shaping the future. This book is meant to help facilitate that work. These meditations offer a wide range of possibilities for the reader. Some of them will be comforting, and some of them will be unsettling. They will help seekers find many different opportunities to reflect about their own journey. They will challenge readers to interrogate their own perspectives, to listen more carefully to what others are saying, and be better at discerning their path forward. These meditations will challenge readers to ask and answer this very essential question: do you really want to be well? Do you really want to be well? This foundational question lies at the root of all the work that needs to be done to repair our relationships in our nation. All of us will need to discover how to answer it honestly. When we do that, our answer will help us to know how to go forward or to know if we really intend to go forward. This book will help you to find your answer and to imagine your way forward as you grapple with our collective future. There's a lovely story about Mullah Nasruddin, who lost his key and was outside in the yard looking for his key. Some of you may have heard this story before, but it deserves to be told over and over because it's so wonderful. And his friend came along and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm looking for my key." And he said, "Where did you?" He started helping me. Let me help you. And so he started looking around, trying to help him. And he kept looking, and he didn't see. He looked in different parts of the garden, and he finally said to him, "So where did you lose the key?" And the mullah said, "Well, I lost it inside, but the light's better out here." And so one of the things that I think is really important for us to remember is that we have to look in the right place for the answer. It's not going to do us any good to look for the key outside that was lost inside. And we look for the answer external to us when the answer is really internal. And that, to me, that story really sums up the dilemma that faces us as human beings. Now, please don't get me wrong. I do think that we needed to end segregation in this country. I do think that we need to end the new layers of polarization that we have. There is no question about that. We need new laws. We need to disestablish the racist systems that have been put into place. All of that needs to happen, but none of that's going to happen until we destabilize our inner stuff that keeps making that external world make sense to us. The world is the way we want it to be. And when I say we, I mean the collective we. Those of us on the screen want the world to be different. And many people want the world to be different. But until we are willing to do the work of destabilizing the stuff inside of us that helps to make this world make sense, then this world will keep on making sense. And it's important for people to understand that. When I talk about this, people get upset at me, and Black people don't like for me to talk about it because it eliminates being able to just kind of sit and be a victim. You have to decide, all of us have to decide. White people have to decide if you want to be well more than you want to be supreme. And people of color have to decide if we want to be well more than we want to be victims. We have to make that decision. So if, one of the things that I think is a very good example of this is the way we treat people who are on disability. If you're on disability, you're not encouraged to work to not be disabled. You're not encouraged to do as much as you can. You're encouraged to be as disabled as you can be. I watch that in my own family because I have some people living on disability, and they're not encouraged to do anything to make themselves more independent. Because if you get too independent, you'll lose your disability. So you're not encouraged to be well because you get paid to be sick. And that's a very interesting way to think about this whole issue. We talk about peace, but we have war going on inside of us. And as long as there's war going on inside of us, war will make more sense outside of us. And we will be more comfortable with disturbance outside of us because it helps us to not have to be so disturbed by the war that's inside of us. Right at the moment, we have got so much fear, so much commitment to violence, so much willingness to be violent because we are afraid. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's real important to stop and take a deep breath and not let ourselves just be dragged down the road by it. It takes effort to do that. every day, vigilance to get up in the mornings and say, I'm going to stand in this space of imagining a world where there really is peace, because that is what I prefer over war, which means then that I don't get to run around like a chicken with no head and live in chaos all day and be disturbed and disrupted. Because if I really want peace, it ought to start with me. And what does it mean for peace to start with me? To quit letting myself be dragged down the road by every wind that comes along. Howard Thurman says that if you, and I hope you all know Howard Thurman, I would guess you do. Um, Howard Thurman says that if you don't get to the core of yourself and have this sense of being able to stand in the truth of who you are and what you care about and what makes you the person you are, that you will be blown by every wind like the willow tree. You know weeping willow trees? Weeping willow trees are so beautiful, but who wants to be blown back and forth like weeping willow trees? And we see that every day. People who think they can just get up and whatever they make up today, that's the truth for the day. So what's the flavor of truth today? We can't afford that. We have to have some things that we do not negotiate on a daily basis. That it's true today, it's true tomorrow, it's true next week. And for me, what's true is this: I can be free. And I've always believed that I could be free. I have chosen to never accept that as a little Black girl growing up in Arkansas, I had to be somebody's victim or not free person. I had no idea how to get to freedom, but I knew freedom was out there and I was going to find the way. In the process of trying to find that way, I have done the work I've done and come to this place. If I can be free, so can everybody. It is God's intention for people to be free, to find out who they were put here to be and what they were put here to do, and to be free to do that. That was God's intention for every human being. Because I don't believe in a hierarchy of human beings. I do not think that there's some humans that are better than others. I think everybody is a beloved child of God, and God loves everybody equally. And if you don't believe that, then you've got a serious theological problem with trying to understand what kind of God you've got. And not only what kind of God you've got, but do you have a whole lot of gods? You know, a God that created one group of people different from another, because if it's a God that creates some people and cares more about them than others, it's a very strange, confused God. So you either get on the pathway of knowing that everybody is a beloved child of God, or you're over here in this camp with a God with many gods. And I think that we have many people that have several different versions of God that allow them to think a hierarchy of human value makes sense, because we think some people are better than others. We get caught up in all this celebrity foolishness. Celebrity is such a waste of time. It's such a waste of time because it lasts for a minute and it's truly a fool's errand, because next week somebody will be shinier than you and you won't be a celebrity anymore, which is why celebrities are so hard to deal with, because they know they're standing on quicksand. So hierarchy of human value has to go in any paradigm that's seeking real healing. And racial healing is just a piece of the whole healing paradigm. You know, we kind of camp out around race because we've made it into a great big to-do, which it is in many ways. I was having a conversation the other day where we were talking about race as race is really an illusion, because if you took away all of our outer skins, we'd all just be bloody red, right? And so we would all kind of look like each other. But the truth is, the particularity of my being this person with this skin is important, but it doesn't make me different from you who have a different color skin, or somebody else whose skin is not like any of ours, either on this screen or mine. So I think that we have to understand, start to get a little better at being respectful of people's particularity, but then understanding how we're universally connected. That we are universally connected as human beings. And what is it that makes us human? And what do we want there to be to connect us as human beings? And are we more interested in being human than we are holding on to whatever our particularities are, thus holding on to our histories and narratives and woundedness, which gets back to the essential question of, do you want to be well? And to me, that, I have rheumatoid arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis has been my greatest teacher in helping me to come to the answer of, yes, I want to be well. If I want to be well, there are many things I have to do in a day in honor of this chronic illness that makes me a better person. If I don't want to be well, I can be laid back and halfway do it, and I pay for it very well. So when it comes to this business of race and violence and poverty, the reason why we haven't done anything about all of this is because we don't want to. There's no reason why we can't. Jeffrey Sachs says that we could eliminate poverty, and people want to laugh at him. But we don't want everybody to be up to par. We don't want everybody to have what they need, because people like hierarchy. As a people now, I'm not talking about you and me. So you have to get past just seeing yourself in this conversation. We are individuals in this conversation, but we are also, we need to be connected to our own shadow stuff in this issue. But we also need to know that some of it we've already learned some things about. But as a collective nation, I don't think America wants to be well. And that concerns me. That concerns me a lot. I have to ask myself, I'm an Episcopalian most of the time anyway, and I have to ask myself, does the church even want to be well? And I'm not so sure that it does. Because the price that one has to pay is a willingness to interrogate the places in which we have chosen to stand, and to see if we want to keep reinforcing that, or if we want to let it go for the sake of a new understanding, a deeper vision. My most favorite word of all of the religious related words is metanoia. That's my most favorite word, a new way to see. And do I have the courage to keep on being led down the road to get to a new way to see when it comes to race? I grew up in rural Arkansas with a sharecropping father who was not able to read or write, and would take me with him to when he had to conduct business when I was a little kid, so I could sign his name. He would make an X, and then I would sign his name for him. My mother was a school teacher who graduated from college when I was 18 years old. And my mom had gone to college for 18 years because we were in Arkansas and there were no schools quite around us. She had to go take classes and go do correspondence classes. I used to see her sitting at the kitchen table doing her lessons. So 18 years, Mama went to college. She graduated from college the same year that I graduated from high school. It really does interest me to reflect upon the fact that it took my mother 18 years to get one degree, and in 12 years, I got 3 degrees. So there are differences, and things have shifted, and there is access to resources that makes me have a different set of responsibilities to be out doing stuff that my mother would not even be able to understand. My mother would never be able to understand that I get to sit here on this screen talking to you about all this stuff. It was totally beyond her to comprehend, but she would be proud of me for doing it. That I do know. My father would be proud of me for doing it. And when I preached at the Washington National Cathedral, I was so happy to be able to tell that story and say that I brought those people with me. And my 12-year-old brother who died because he was Black and poor and couldn't get treatment for appendicitis. All of those pieces of my history come with me to this point. And as I confront the question, do I want to be well? Do I want to be well more than I want to hold on to those things and stay in some space that's not quite on the path to wellness? I say that to you to say that the way I was socialized was to believe that there was no possibility of real relationships across lines of race. No possibility. I grew up with separate, totally separate, and nobody was pretending equal was even a part of that equation. You know, we got the little pieces of chalk that came from the white school that had been used down to being this big, and there would be a box full of that short chalk. I didn't know that chalk was a big stick of chalk until I went to college, because I'd never seen a whole stick of chalk as a high school student, because we always got the leftovers from the white school. We got the books that had been used for 5 or 6 years and had, you know, they used to have, way back in the day, you had your name put in the book when they gave it to you at school. And the books we got had 6 or 7 people that had used it. So that meant 6 or 7 years ago, that was a new book. And now we were getting it, and it was supposed to be a new book for us. Given that history, that narrative, the things I learned, the things I heard, the behaviors I saw, there was a strong message that you can't be free. There's no space here for you. You keep your head down and don't take up too much space and don't make too much noise. And I said, no, thank you. No, thank you. I will read what I want to read. I begged my father to buy a subscription to the Sunday Commercial Appeal, which came from Memphis. Great big old thick newspaper like this, and I loved it. I even read the stock exchange report. That's how thirsty I was to read, and I wanted to read stuff that I didn't know anything about. I wanted to learn, and I would get up in the mornings as a little kid and go sit outside and watch the sunrise and wonder where it came from and where was it going, because somewhere out there had to be the possibility of being who I got sent here to be. So it's everybody has got the call to explore the journey and to go from where you are to whatever horizons are in front of you. And that is what healing is about. It's saying yes over and over and over to that call. And racism can't go with you, because it's constricting and restricting, and it makes you define yourself as a better person than somebody else, which undermines the journey to really finding out who you really are. Because the time we get fixated on, the ego loves it, because the ego likes to believe the lies it gets told. And so you have to stay in you have to interrogate that lie. So the lie for me was, you can't be. And the part for me to say was, well, I will see. Maybe so, maybe no. But my mama used to say, I might not be able to do it, but I'm going to die trying. And Zora Neale Hurston's mother used to say, jump at the sun, because if you jump at the sun, you might hit a star, but at least you'll be off the ground. And getting off the ground is critical. And we need to get up off the ground in the 21st century, and begin to imagine a world where people can be treated like God meant for them to be. I will not buy the violent war God. I don't have any use for that God. And that is the God of Christianity, actually. As far as I'm concerned, most of the stuff in the Old Testament needs to be dealt with in some way different from the way we deal with it. I almost said discarded, but I think that might be a little too far to go. But I think it's because to make it sound like God's got people that matter and people that don't matter, to me, has got nothing to do with the God that I understand. The God that I understand, the God that I want to be with, the God that I interact with, the God that I follow is the God who loves every human being. And maybe I want to go as far as Howard Thurman would go and say every thing that's alive. You know, Howard Thurman talked about the part of the title that I gave to Father John about this day was thirsting for, um, having a hunger and thirst for racial healing. And Thurman talks a lot about the hunger of the heart. And he says that the heart it doesn't matter whose heart it is, but the heart hungers. And there's a funny little movie that some of you may know called the Beast of the Southern Wild. And there's a little character in there named Hush Puppy. And I love Hush Puppy with her little pitiful self. They made her pretty pitiful, but that's another whole story. But one of the things she does that I think is so critical is she goes around listening to the heartbeat of things. She wants to hear the heartbeat of the bird, the heartbeat of, she goes into, there's a scene where somebody's on life support and she goes up to them to see if their heart's beating, because she thinks that everything has a heartbeat and everything is connected like that. And that is true. The rhythm of the heart is the rhythm of the heart, and it's probably the same rhythm all over the world. It's a universal truth. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say, I need to ask my doctor friends if this is true, but I believe it to be true. I know that there are universal truths that affect all of us. We all want to be appreciated. We want to have space. We want to be free. We want to do the things that we got sent here to do. I operate under that premise that that is what people want. And then how do we make a world where that's possible? Racism has to go, poverty has to go, sexism has to go, war, violence, all that stuff. But it's going to go slowly because we have gone down so many paths that have got nothing to do with getting us home. Home, wherever home is inside of us, getting us to the, the, the recognition of who we were put here to be. Everybody has come to the world with an assignment, I think. And Thurman says we've come with a imprimatur that God put on us before we got sent from wherever we came. And our job is to kind of explore and find out what that mark is. Another way for me would be to put it in, we come with an assignment. And my job is to find out what is my assignment. My assignment is not yours. Your assignment is not mine, but all of us are assigned to come and become the best human we can become. And we come in our particular wrappings. Our wrappings are not all there is to us. Black, white, brown, straight, gay, male, female, whatever. All of those are particularities. And we let the particularities get completely in the way and keep us from seeing the universal. We have just abandoned the notion of universality so that there can't be any place where we connect. I led a clergy retreat a few weeks ago for Lutheran clergy, and I talked for 2 days about a lot of this stuff and trying to help people come to grips with, we're all here together trying to figure out, as Henry Nouwen would say, where the bandage closets are. We're trying to figure out how to get well. How can we help each other get to the healing spaces? And that all of us are in this together, no matter what color. And by the end of those 2 days, there were some people of color in the audience upset because I didn't talk enough about people of color. They missed the whole point. They missed the point of, because it's so important. It's hard to let go of being a victim, and you want your victimhood to always be on the table, or your supremacy to always be on the table. Either one of those things cause you to miss the boat. Yes, we've been victims. Yes, we have been hurt and wounded, all of us, by racism and war. And yes, we cannot deny it. And paying attention to the do I want to be well question asks you not to deny it. It asks you to incorporate it in the journey. to bring it with you. I took 15 years before I could talk about my little brother who died from appendicitis at 12 years old because the white hospital refused to treat him. My father never got over it. My father had post-traumatic stress for the rest of his life. He talked about my brother every day. My house was a fear-based house, and the fear was real because we lived in an environment where we were third-class citizens and we were poor and it was dangerous. So the fear was real, but fear will not run my life. Fear is a part of what I have to work to overcome. Fear is, and I'm not trying to deny it. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to paint it in any way except to name it. And the sadness and the grief around my little brother's death, I will carry in some part of my body till I die. But I do not have to live as if that same thing is true for me and my children. It is not true that I'm going to die because a white hospital won't give me service or that my children are going to die. They could get less than the same treatment that somebody white would get because racism still lives quite well in the medical profession. But we're not going to die because the hospital won't take us in. So if I keep living that narrative as if that's the only narrative, I short circuit my capacity to be a well person. I make it difficult to be who God wants me to be when I don't have to anymore. But I also will never forget that my brother did die. And I'll just tell you, I can't tell this story without telling you that I told this story at an event in Asheville, North Carolina, some months ago. And there was a med school professor in the audience, a pediatrician, who came up to me afterwards and said she was designing a curriculum about medical inequities. And she wondered if I would be open to her naming the curriculum in honor of my brother. It was such a sweet offer and brings tears to my eyes every time I think about it. And every time, because it was like 60 years ago, more than 60 years ago now. And here I'm telling this story and it's moving somebody in the 21st century to say, to compassion and to name the curriculum. They wrote this curriculum and they named it in honor of my brother and invited me to come and speak. And it was so lovely. It was a very lovely happening. And I'm so grateful for that. And I wish my father could have been there to hear it. I hope that there is some connections in the other world that helps him to know that something happened with that was good. But whether he does know or not, it interrupts the negative energy that's out there trying to keep this negative stuff going. My brother's name is Garland, whoever that is asking. And my son wrote about him and told the story of him when he was in the 5th grade in school. So though my brother died when he was 12, he lives, and we tell the story. We are willing to embrace the grief and the sadness, and we let it make us stronger. We stand in the truth of our narratives, and white people have such a hard time listening to the narratives of people of color, particularly Black people. One of the things that I think we as Black people get so weary about is white people don't want to hear our story. They want us to tell the story they want to hear. They love to hear our stories of success. They don't want to hear our stories of grief and suffering. And our story is our story. And when somebody tells their story, you don't get to edit it. You just get to listen. And if you can say something, you say something. If you can't, you just cry with them or stand with them or be quiet with them or be in it with them. And I think in all of my teaching, I try to get people to understand. Nobody's asking you to fix it all. We're just saying, can you listen? Can I take off my shoes and let you walk in them for a little bit? Can you understand what it's like to get up every day and go out into a world that's looking to see what it can do to you? That's what you are if you're not a white person in America. Is somebody if somewhere ready to denigrate you at any minute, any time. And you have to just learn to ignore a lot of it, or else you can't live. You'll take up all your time if you just pay attention to the possibility of denigration every minute. I pay attention to microaggressions, but I don't let them run my life. And I try to be careful not to let stuff go that I need to acknowledge, but I don't want to get too fixated on it because I don't want my life to be run by forces external to me. I want my life to be run by being grounded at the center of myself and being the person that I want to be in a day, and not giving that authority and power over to energy systems that are outside of me that don't understand and aren't willing to try to understand. It takes a long time to get here. And I paid out a whole bunch of money to good psychotherapists. I want to be clear about that, in helping me with this process. I didn't just get here because I just woke up and said, that's where I want to go. I got here because I said, I want to be well. I want to be free. I want to live in the light rather than dark. And so what do I need to do to get there? And that's what I teach. And people get, when I'm on talk shows, sometimes Black folks will call in really mad because I don't say enough bad stuff about white folks. I'm not here to make white people feel bad. I'm here to tell the best truth I can tell. And you can do what you want to with it. If you let me make you feel bad, that's your choice. But that was not my intention. And what you do with what I say is your business. I take no responsibility for it, because I am not responsible for how other people feel. I am responsible for how I treat people. And I will treat everybody with respect and courage and as much compassion as I can muster at any given time, and with no intention to harm, but every intention to tell the best truth I know and the best truth as I can understand it. And then if that makes you feel bad, then you need to go sit on a rock and think about it and see what that's about, because it's not about me. It's about something inside of you that you need to do something about. And I think that when I talk about, the house is on fire. The house is on fire everywhere. Look at us. I mean, here we are. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about the Middle East, because I was there in the 80s. I was there actually. Dates kind of escape me, but I was there right after the massacres at Sabra and Shatila, and was in the hospital where little children that had missing limbs and cut up faces had been abused by the whoever, those folks that came into the camps in Lebanon and did that. Those folks are all the same people, and they better figure out how to live together. I'm not convinced they ever will, because for thousands of years they've been fighting each other. And all of us need to stand up and say, why don't y'all consider the possibility that God might be asking you to learn how to live together? But we really can't say much because we didn't learn too much about it ourselves. We're here trying to see how we can mistreat each other. And we all have to decide, how much do we want to mistreat somebody? And part of it goes back to, what are the parts of ourselves that we want to mistreat? The things we don't like. If, I'm too fat, I'm too short, I'm too dark, I'm too white, I'm too this, I'm too something. Every time we make comments like that, we're saying, something's not right about me, rather than, I love who I am. I love how I look. I love who I am. I couldn't always say that because the world told me I was too big, too Black. And for a while I believed that foolishness. And then I thought, well, I'm all I've got. So let me see, maybe I can change this narrative a little bit here. And so I now just love it because I go places and people say, "Oh, you're so beautiful," and I laugh about. I know the angels are laughing at me because they're playing such a trick on me because they're saying, "See, little girl, we tried to tell you that when you were going around talking about being ugly. We told you you weren't ugly, and you didn't believe it. And now you're this old lady, and everywhere you go, somebody's saying, "Look at you, aren't you beautiful?" And I'm going, "Yeah, I get it. Y'all think it's funny, but it's wonderful to stand in your own shoes and be the person you were put on the earth to be is the most empowering thing that anybody can do. To stand on your own 2 feet, no matter how wobbly, how good, how bad, how whatever, they're your feet and you stand on them with thanksgiving and affirmation and gratitude. Just that in itself is empowering. And that's what Howard Thurman has taught me and many other people that I have spent time with. Howard Thurman was disliked because he didn't go protest. You know, he was who he was, and he was clear about that. And there was one young activist man in the 60s who was, I don't know who he was, but he sure was smart. He said, "Well, Howard Thurman doesn't go to protests, but he sure does help me understand why I do." So everybody has got their thing, their assignment. And if we do our assignments, we help each other. When George Floyd was murdered, people were panicky, and people, I don't really understand many people just deciding racism existed when George Floyd was murdered. I don't really quite understand where they have been living up until that moment. But nonetheless, it did seem that for some people, that was a real introduction to how messy things are in our country. I got all these emails and calls from folks wanting to know what to do. And I just was so glad to know the wisdom that the Native people in the Pacific Northwest teach their children about what you do if you're lost in the forest. They say, the little children ask, "What do you do if you're lost in the forest?" And the old people say, "You stand still. You stand still because the forest is not lost. The trees are not lost. The birds are not lost. And if you stand still and listen, they will lead you out of the forest." So I was able to say to people, stand still, stand still, listen, see what your heart is demanding of you. I have no idea what you need to do. Calling me up to ask me what to do is like sitting in your kitchen, calling me to ask me what you want for dinner. I don't know what you want. I don't know what's in your refrigerator. I don't know what your resources are. I don't know what your taste buds are like. You know your heart. You know your soul. You know your resources. You know what you can and cannot do. Stand still and see where your heart demands that you go, because then you might accidentally get to the right place. But if I'm going to try to tell you, "Oh, yeah, I can be an encourager, I can be a catalyst. I can tell you about movies and books, and I can tell you about resources. You can come listen at our webinars." But ultimately, you've got to stand still and see where your heart will take you. And then when that happens, you won't get burned out. You know, people are always asking me, "How do you keep from getting burned out?" I'm not going to burn out. I'm just going to burn up. I'm going to use up all my energy one day, and I will go to the next world and look for some more energy. But in the meantime, I'm going to be trying to live my assignment and not somebody else's. Thus, I will have the energy to live my assignment. I do not have the energy to live your assignment because it's not mine. And that's so much of what has happened to us. You know, and the first thing that happens when people start waking up and becoming more conscious is they want to go, white people want to go to some poor Black or brown community and start doing something. My advice is don't do it. Stay at home and talk to the folks closest to you. Talk to yourself. Find out what you really want to do. find out what you're really called to, because the people that you fly off to do something for don't need to have to put up with you trying to figure it out. They've already got enough problems. So just stay at home for a minute, because whatever you get compelled to do won't go away. And I guarantee you that all the trouble will never be gone. So you don't have to worry about the world running out of trouble before you get out there to do your part. And I think patience, listening as we begin to uncover these places in ourselves that open us up to new light and new energy, demand that we get clear about what we're supposed to do with that, instead of having a knee-jerk response. There was so much knee-jerking after George Floyd was murdered, and now 3 years later, most of those folks have gone on by the wayside, back to doing what they were doing before, because they didn't ever get on the right path in the first place. And so if you get on the right path that's really yours, you don't have a choice but to stay on it, because you'll be so miserable if you don't. So the last thing I want to say a little bit about, because this is such a big deal, at least in the circles that I travel in, is the difference between being an ally and being a fellow pilgrim. And the question that I ask about that is, if you were on your deathbed, who would you rather be accompanied by, an ally or a fellow pilgrim? A fellow pilgrim is somebody who can be inconvenienced by you. Nothing that you need inconveniences them, because they have committed to being on the path with you. A fellow pilgrim is somebody who is willing to walk a mile in your shoes, or 2 or 3 or 4, without grumbling, without editing, and to just be present. I have a friend whose husband has been recently diagnosed with cancer, and there's nothing I can do except walk on the road with her and be present. That's all. And that she knows that, and I know that. She's walked on the road. She's a white woman. We've been friends for 50 years. She is one of my children's sets of godparents. How many times have we cried about my worry about my Black sons growing up and not getting killed in this country? She can't fix it, but she knows the angst I have, and she walks with me in it and holds my hand and cries with me. And then we go on to believe that they'll be okay. And they have been, thank God for that. So an ally is somebody who dips in and dips out, dips in when it's convenient. George Floyd's killed. We're all out in the street. Everybody's marching, protesting, doing all this stuff. And then after a while, everybody goes home, goes back to what they've been doing. Over 3,000 people have been killed by police since George Floyd was killed. Do you know who they are? Have we talked about them? Do we care that it's happened? No, because it wasn't sensational. It wasn't televised. And we haven't even thought about them too much. We don't know their names. Many of them didn't even get reported. You have to go look at the police statistics to even find out about them, which is what I've been doing, because I'm so committed to the whole project of reimagining policing. We've got to do something about that system that takes innocent lives the way it does. And we just can't keep on tolerating it and acting like it's not happening. It is a very difficult thing to do anything about, but I will not give up on it. But it troubles me that we had thousands of people all over the world out in the streets, and they've all gone home. And thousands of people, 3,000 to be exact, have been killed in 3 years. And we, even in this United States, I'm not talking about all over the world, I'm talking about here. And we know a handful of them. But most of the time, there's not even a news report about it. All right, I have been talking a very long time, and you have been so sweet to not just go turn your screen off and go away. So let me stop here. And I don't do a good job looking at the chat when I'm talking, because I have to keep my mind on what I'm trying to say. So I don't know what the questions are, but I'm happy to hear I guess it's another half hour we've got together to hear your thoughts and reflections and questions, or whatever might be something that I can illuminate a little more, or anything.
Catherine, thank you so much for that beautiful, beautiful sharing. Hey, everybody, we've got to honor that. That was so precious and beautiful
Thank
and
you.
wise and helpful and holy. And I really thank you. And I could listen to you all day.
Oh,
Um, I see a
thank
couple
you.
of questions, Catherine. I want to ask you
Mm,
first about the question, do you want to be well, and the gospel story? And then you're going to get a
mhm,
question from somebody about fear and how do you work on getting rid of the fear? And then
mhm,
someone's going to ask you a question about why don't we want to be well? Why do we need bad people, et cetera. I'll be ask you those. But of course, I can ask you about Dr. King and nonviolence all day long and so forth and so on.
mm.
But I read about you in some of your essays, and I knew that you had been teaching that great question. You're such a great teacher, Catherine. But you got that from the Gospel of John, as I recall,
The,
in
the
chapter
the
5,
Bethsaida
where
story, the
yeah,
Bethsaida,
and I
the
want you
pool
to
of Bethsaida.
reflect on the gospel, the where Jesus is by the pool there, and the guy can't get in the pool, and instead of healing the guy, instead of putting the guy in the pool, he asks a question, which
Right.
is just life changing. And you've put the question to each one of us and to the whole country and the whole world, to Black people
Mhm.
and white people. And
Right.
do you want to be well? And you're inviting us not to rush into an answer, but actually
Right.
maybe to sit and listen because we don't really want to be well. So, can you tell us more about the great question? Any thoughts about Jesus, who's so gentle and compassionate and nonviolent and wise, asking that question, how that helped you? And
Mhm.
any more thoughts about the gospel story itself? Because it's no one talks about that except for you. It's wonderful.
That's
Thank you.
right. When I preached about that when I went to the Washington National Cathedral, and
Yeah,
I
I read
chided
your
myself
sermon.
saying, maybe you could talk about something other than arthritis when you've been invited to preach at the Washington National Cathedral. But it turned out to be exactly the right sermon
Yeah, it
because I
was
got
great.
so many responses. I think that it really does imply a lot about your will, that
Hmm.
sickness has to do with intentionality and will. And if you don't, you got to get engaged with whatever it is, whatever path it is you're following. And if you're following the sickness path, then you'll keep reinforcing it. And if you follow the wellness path, whatever you follow, what is it they say, that whatever energies you feed, those are the ones that will grow. And I think Jesus was really saying to this person, well, in 30 years, have you ever thought about why you're still lying here and can't get in this water? Because in 30 years, I think I might have been able to figure out how to just roll myself into the pool or get in and stay till the angel came. I would have figured out something. But you got to turn your intention that way. You got to be open to the change. Our our illnesses can become such a part of our identity until we don't want to let them go. And we don't know we don't want to let them go. Somebody will say, well, that's crazy. No, it's not crazy. It's just what we get comfortable with. You get comfortable with your limitations, you get comfortable with your status quo, and then it's hard to see yourself different. So I think Jesus was encouraging him and encouraging us to question ourselves about that. How comfortable am I with this situation? Because it's a situation that I know. That we love to say the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. All of that stuff reinforces unconsciousness. Let me stay unconscious. And I wish I didn't know some of the stuff I know, because it requires responsibility. It requires me, if I want to be honest, even if I don't want to work on changing, at least I can't keep on saying the same thing if I'm trying to be honest. So I know that if I don't invite myself into healing energy, that the healing energy will stay just a few feet away from me
Mm.
because it won't run me over. It waits on the invitation. And the invitation comes from inside of us. It says, yes, I do want to be well. I will do anything here. I will, and that's what I had to say. I mean, I have gone, I can't even tell you. One of these days, I'm going to write about my journey, my now nearly over 40 years journey with rheumatoid arthritis, which has been the greatest teacher of all of my teachers, because it forced me to let go of so many ideas. And I think Jesus was really, really prompting that in that person. I did that. I did that sermon somewhere, and there was somebody trying to be extraordinarily radical, so they wanted to chide me about blaming the victim. And I thought, you know what? To reduce what I just said to that discussion means that you're not trying to understand, because it's not about blaming the victim for Jesus to ask him, "Do you want to be well?" It's about clarifying your intentions. Do we want to alleviate poverty? Do we want to have peace on the earth? Do we want to live in a nonviolent world? Do we want to eradicate racism? Do we really? Because we have enough food on the planet to feed everybody. So why don't we? We throw away 90 billion tons of food in this country in 1 year. That's enough food to feed us and a few other people. Why don't we do it? So do we want to feed people, or do we want to just lament about folks going to bed hungry? And I think we don't want to do it because we don't
Mhm.
want to go to the trouble. What is the trouble? We have to turn our face in the direction. And I think that was Jesus's challenge. And Jesus was always challenging people to take a real look at what is it? What are you after really? And we run over that. We don't want to. We talk about everything but that because we want to make him a legalist who's telling us go do this and go do that. But he's really saying go look at yourself and go govern yourself accordingly to what you see, and open yourself up to this light that wants to shine on you and help you to see. I don't know if that helps illumine that a little bit,
Yeah,
but
that's wonderful, Catherine. So let's jump to that question about that Al is asking, which you've already started. Why do we not want to be well? And he puts it that we always have to label people and good and bad. We have to create them, black, white, but
mhm,
Palestinians, Israelis, Ukrainians, Russians, Democrats, Republicans. And
mhm.
why do we do this? So why don't we want to be well? And and any more thoughts on that? As I'm saying this, I'm remembering that provocative sentence. You remember, Catherine, from James Baldwin, who said his answer was, "Well, white people, I mean, for white people," he said, uh, "you can't you can't go to equality, and you can't have an us and them, because if we're all us, if we're all one, then you're going to have to deal with your pain inside."
Mhm,
Baldwin was
mhm.
saying, we do that to avoid our pain. It's just another
Yeah.
strategy, like the alcoholic who drinks to numb themselves from the pain.
Mhm.
And it's all the lack of healing inside. And I'm thinking I have another question after about that. So, any more
Well,
thoughts about Jesus and why we don't want
well,
to be well, and that inner thing of healing that we have to move toward and choose and surrender for? Thoughts like that.
I think it's a good point about to to help us assuage our pain, because you think about people that live without shelter. When you see somebody that's out uh, standing on the corner asking you for money, it's easier to blame them for being poor than it is to deal with how they make you feel, how it makes you feel that somebody doesn't have a bed to sleep in tonight. I'll tell you, for myself personally, I love a rainy, cloudy, cold day,
Hmm.
but I work with people who live outdoors. So I know that when we're having these rainy, cloudy days that I love, that my friends are suffering. And that causes me dissonance. I love this day, my friends are suffering, and I have to hold both of those things. We do not do well holding paradoxes. There's something in us that wants to be fundamentalist. We want it to be all one way or the other, and it's both. I still love rainy days, and my friends are outside getting wet, and I need to stand in just knowing that a part of me loves the day, and a part of me hates that my friends are getting wet, and I can't fix it, and I'm willing to live in that space, that paradoxical turmoil, that dissonance. And we're just not willing to live in dissonance. So we will do whatever we have to do to get ourselves out of it. And if I can blame them, well, if they weren't poor, if they had gone to work, if they weren't drinking, if they, you start blaming them rather than just dealing with, it makes me feel bad that I can't fix your life and make it better. And I just own it. And then I go on about my business because I can't do anything but own it. And if I don't do that, then I let something external to me make me less than who I can be. And I didn't help them anyway. I might help them better if I stay focused and stay faithful, because I might actually do something someday that helps to eliminate homelessness. So does that make sense to
Yes.
people that how that works? I mean, it's not like we're all that conscious about it either. It's happening, and we don't really sometimes even know what's happening. We just know, I can't, it bothers me so much to go to sleep at night in my wonderful bed, knowing that my friends are trying to find a doorway to sleep in. And I wish that I could just do something and fix it all. I really, truly do. But I really know that I can't. I do what I can do. And I have to accept that limitation. And it's very hard to help to accept the limitations and to be present to what I can be present to. And I think that that's a part of what makes us blame people and create these little hierarchical structures. Well, if you'd worked as hard as I had, and if you'd overcome your challenges and wounds the way I did, you wouldn't be in this shape. Well, you don't know any of that. You don't know you don't know how hard they've tried. You don't know what all really happened to them. And maybe you don't even know how come you're not there. That's another piece. You could be there too. There's a little bit of that in it too, that, it could be me. And what if it were me? What would I do? So yeah, we just have to own all of it. We just have to own where we are. Recently my youngest son lost a friend who was 32 years old. And he said to me, Mama, we're just going to be sad for a while. We're not going to run from it. We're not going to try to hide. We're not going to try to talk ourselves out of it. We're just going to be sad. And he's right. And but you got to be willing to live, in that with that dance. And we don't want to. It's hard. I get it. But it's either that or to get very encrusted then in blaming people, because that's where your energy goes. That the energy that you were using to feel bad is going now toward blaming, and it's not good for you or the people you're blaming, because it doesn't help anybody.
Thank you, Catherine. Let me ask you too, Catherine, a question from Barbara about
Mhm.
fear. Basically, her question is, you talked about fear and the reality of it in your own life, but it's a whole world of fear we're witnessing. Her question is
Mhm.
very direct. How do we overcome fear?
Yeah.
You've been talking about it the whole
Mhm.
time, but maybe you could
I think
that question.
you start looking at yourself. I have there are things that I think I'm more concerned now about the safety of my children than I am most anything else. I don't really live in fear because I refuse to use up my energy that way to be immobilized by it. But I think you start looking looking at yourself. And once I heard somebody talk about to work on some disciplines of courage. Pick some
Mm,
things that, like, if you are afraid, the one of the examples the person gave was like walking in tall grass in the summertime. If you're kind of worried about snakes and you go out and walk in tall grass, you're kind of saying, I'm taking a chance here that there are no snakes here. And I'll do this today. And then tomorrow I'll go a little further. And next week, maybe I can walk on some other place that's, I think I talked about white people who are so worried about going into communities that are communities of color. If you people tell me downtown Atlanta is so dangerous, white people in North Atlanta that don't come downtown will tell me how dangerous downtown Atlanta is. When I push them to tell me how come they say that, they don't have an answer. They
mm,
just have an aura of downtown because it's poor. They're poor people, that the people that live without shelter, many of them are downtown and they're people of color, so they're scared. So if you have that fear, you could practice maybe coming downtown and driving through downtown a few times and see if you make it out. And if you make it out, you might decide that you'll come back and actually park your car and go in a restaurant and eat. You work on it. You don't just think you got to do all of it at once. You have to, what my poet friend David White talks about, being a half a shade braver. So you try, you
mm,
develop a discipline of courage, work on a discipline of courage, and eventually you maybe can grow into having confronted how some things inside of you are causing you fear, and how you're externalizing that into the world. You got 5 locks on your door and a gun, because that's where we are right now in this country, and you're still scared. And you're going to shoot through the door rather than see who's outside the door. That's pitiful. And maybe we can do, well, we need to do something about guns in the first place, but that's another conversation for another day. But maybe you could, if you were that person with 5 locks, maybe you could do with 4 locks and then work on 3 locks. And then one day maybe you would just have 1 lock. And maybe one day you would have enough courage to have no locks and realize it wasn't locks keeping you safe in the first place, because it's not locks that's keeping us safe. If somebody really wants to get in the house, they will. So I don't know if that helps at all, Barbara, but I just think that you're not going to get over it. You can't talk yourself out of being afraid. You cannot talk yourself out of it. You have to live your way out of it.
mm.
And it's a process, and you do it little bit by little bit, and you pick a few things that, like I'm just described, and see what you can do about that, and talk about it. It's good to talk about it. Perhaps the greatest fear is the fear of death, and so you also need to pay attention to the little ways we're called to die. And if we embrace those little deaths along the way, the big death wouldn't be quite as frightening to us, because it's the unknown, that's there. And that whole business about death is a day for another discussion for another day as well. But that is basically human beings having to deal with that you're going to disappear. And we don't, we've done, all of us people of faith, we've done a whole lot of reading and stuff about it all, but we don't know anything. We just have to take it as this is the possibility. I don't tend to worry about it too much. I think when I'm gone, I'll get what I need. And if I died and found out that there was no life after death, and nothing, all the theological stuff I'd studied was not true, it would not matter. I would do it again, because my life is better for having lived this way than it would have been had I not done it. And I just think it's capitalism that makes us so worried about, am I going to get a reward? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. The reward is having a better life right now. And that's
Thank you.
right now good enough for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask you a question I call it's about identity. And then after we talk about that, I'm going to call on the board members of the Beatitude Center, which I've never done before, to put them on the spot. Sharon and Kathy and Terry, to see if they have questions for you, and I'll let them raise your hand. So I'm giving you a moment to prepare, you all.
All right.
As I was listening, Catherine, you're a daughter of Howard Thurman, but I keep thinking of Steve Biko because to me, he was so critically important. When I was in South Africa for a month, I made a pilgrimage to his house and grave, and I think when he introduced Black consciousness, that was the end of apartheid more than anything, more than what Mandela did, which was violence. Because as you're talking about empowering and claiming your identity, we're human beings. So so just bear with me here. I heard you talk about there's no hierarchy of humans, and this is critical to my whole life's work too, Catherine. Everyone is a beloved child of God. Everyone is loved equally by God. And if that's not true, then you're not worshiping a living God. You have a whole slew of gods. But I say that once you do that, some people aren't people, and then you can hurt them and kill them, not just label them, and you can vaporize them. So that this understanding of ourselves and God is the basis of gospel nonviolence, if you're with me. And so this has always been my work and interest, Catherine. So Henry Nouwen, who was my friend, he spent his whole life talking, as you know, saying to be a wounded healer instead of a wounded wounder, you have to claim your identity as the beloved of God. That's what you were talking about. And I thinking about that, my question was always, how come what Jesus was the epitome of total nonviolence, and you just touched him and you were healed? Because there's no violence in him. And I think it's because he was maybe the first and only person to really claim, like Henry would say, his identity as the beloved of God. As Howard Thurman says, to stand your ground in yourself, be yourself, be free, as you were talking about, and all those beautiful things. And that's what the key to nonviolence is, as I understand Gandhi and Dr. King, that each human being is called to, once you accept I am infinitely loved by God, I'm too, following Jesus' example, the beloved daughter of God, beloved son of God, you reclaim your dignity. As you're teaching us, you're no longer victim, you're no longer a victimizer, and you're no longer hurting and killing people, and you're on the journey with Gandhi and King and Thurman into nonviolence. So my question is really for you is about Gandhi, Kingian nonviolence in the mix of all of what you were saying. And perhaps like you, it comes down to the question of the identity, because I think that for me is how Jesus and everyone, how we can move into that freedom and stand our ground. Because if you don't know you're the beloved of God, I think you're completely lost, and then you're going to be bombing and killing people and hanging them from trees. And what are your thoughts on all that?
If people don't get, if we don't get at peace inside of ourselves, we're never going to be okay with anything. I mean, do we actually have the capacity to believe that we are loved by God if we don't love ourselves? And how do you get to love yourself except to get to know yourself and to accept that that self is okay? You know, we've been told so much about not being okay. We start with little kids, teaching them not to imagine. The first thing somebody tries to do to a little kid is kill your imagination, right? Little kids come with their idea they're going to fly to the moon with no wings, and we start trying to set them straight instead of saying, "Oh my goodness, how would you do that?" And what would be the way you would get off the ground? I mean, get into the story with them, make them feel good about thinking bigger rather than trying to give them your sense of reality. The world will teach them that you need an airplane and a rocket ship eventually. They'll find that out soon enough. So I think that we need to we can't accept God's imagination. Think about God's imagination. God's imagination puts us all to shame.
Yeah.
God created all of this, helped bring all this into being, however that all happened, this universe. And yet our imagination is about that big, and we want to impose it upon everybody and everything. So that keeps you from being feeling like you're beloved, because you can't be okay. There's something wrong with you. You're not quite okay. You're not quite good enough. By whose definition? So people don't believe, we mostly don't believe God loves us.
Yeah.
We don't. We just say it, we're supposed to believe it, but when you get right down to it, well, first of all, you got to get it straight in your head who you think God is in the first place. And I love to say God's way above my pay grade, and I'm working hard to try to catch a glimpse of what I'm even talking about when I'm talking about God. That's why I like to talk about the heavenly kitchen cabinet committee that's made up of God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus and the ancestors and the angels. And out of all of those, I can catch on to somebody there, because it's a big deal trying to put all that in perspective. And we need to be honest about where we are. And, I used to drive around in Macon, Georgia when my sons were young. I was a single mom. And I would say to Jesus, when was the last time you tried to raise two black boys in the middle of Georgia? Do you understand what this is like here? The being real and being where you are and just bringing yourself to the table is a part of coming to grips with, yes, I'm loved. Yes, I'm okay. No matter what, I'm okay. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to work my way to a reward after I die. I'm not worried about it. I'm trying to get through the day with peace and contentment and integrity and some sense of being okay. That's it. And God is okay with that. I believe that because the Jungians say that one of the things about Jesus is Jesus knew exactly who he was, and he stood in that with every bit of himself, and it made him so powerful. And when we come to grips with, this is who I am, and I'm sticking by it, and I'm open to growing, but I'm not open to negotiating who I am. It will be for us as it was for Jesus. We will be empowered, and we will be able to do things. Jesus says we'll do greater works than he. I never understood that, because I always wanted to go, you raise people from the dead. I haven't done that, but I think I'm beginning to catch a glimpse of what he was talking about.
That's great, Catherine. That's so great. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, but I want to call on my friends, and these are members of the board of the Beatitude Center, and see if they have a question for you. Sharon, Kathy, or Terry. Maybe Terry's not here. Or there you are. Feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in. Kathy, go ahead.
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you so much, Dr. Meeks. So I thought I had a question for you before we even started. Um, and of course, you've answered it in 1,000 different ways. And it was going to be, I lived in Atlanta for quite a long time. My work there was more healing through interfaith work than
Mm-hmm.
specifically through racial healing. But of course, there was a lot of overlap. And then I moved about 4 years ago to Greensboro, Georgia. So right here in the middle of sharecropping country. And
Mm-hmm.
my question that was forming was, how can we scale some of the work of the center for a small rural parish? I'm a part of Episcopal Church of the Redeemer here in Greensboro. Vibrant community, small, very big footprint in the community, a lot of outreach and all that. But now I mean, you said very clearly, without saying it directly, that's ours to figure out. We have the models. I really want so many of my friends to hear this today, and we'll figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I've been to your church to speak before.
I know that was before I moved here.
You know,
Yeah, yeah, and we're actually, we're growing, which is a
Yeah.
really good thing. But what I really want, so that was my question that I was going to ask, and now I don't have to because I really, really get what you said. We will figure this out here for our circumstances. But I do want to tell you that I'm going to be pondering the connection that you made between destabilizing and imagination for some time. Already the wheels are turning. I was thinking as soon as we finish the conversation, I have to go out for a walk so I can just like
Yeah.
ponder.
I really want to invite people to let your imagination go where it takes you, and imagine, particularly in imagining the world is a different place. We
Yeah,
cannot have a sustainable new world unless we can imagine it. It
yes.
starts with that. We need to imagine the world healed and peaceful, and people having what they need in spite of the world, which is, I think, something the enslaved people did pretty well, or they wouldn't have been able to survive.
Mm.
Yeah,
They were able to imagine a world that they could not see. There was no reason to believe that the world could be different, but they did believe it anyway.
yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Catherine. Thank you, Catherine, too. Okay, thanks. Sharon or Terry, a question? Okay, so we'll end with Sharon's question and Catherine's comment, and then I'll give a little commercial update, and we'll sign off. Go ahead, Sharon. Welcome.
Well, and yeah, of course, thank you so much, Catherine. Your words just are stirring so much within both David and I. We're sitting here chatting as we go along because there's just so much that you've given us.
You really turn on some lights inside, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Turning some lights inside.
Yay!
But and you talked about the narrative that people live out of, and the need to change that narrative. And as a spiritual director and a counselor, I often use that. So I just wondered, what questions can we ask people to help them change the narrative, or how can we help them change that narrative? What do we direct them to look at in order to change the narrative?
David White talks. Do you know the poet
Yeah.
David White?
David White.
Talks.
We
I was
love
just
him.
with him. We just did a thing together in Asheville on Thursday of last Thursday. But David White talks a lot about what is the conversation you're having with yourself that
That's
you
right.
need to stop,
Yes.
and to be a half a shade braver, and naming that conversation you need to stop. And I think that and also he talks a lot about living your own life and your own questions and forming your own questions. So I think challenging people to interrogate themselves about, is that really, is that narrative the one you want? Is that the conversation you want to be having? If it is, own it and keep having it. But if you're disturbed about it, then do something about it.
Wow, that's
So
great.
I think that's a pretty,
Wow.
I mean, if you don't lament it, either keep understand that you're choosing to do it,
Right.
or change it.
Or change it.
But yeah,
Thank you.
Catherine, that was so beautiful. What a beautiful note to end on. And I'm going to write to you and ask you to see if you can help me to get David to do, I've done an event with him once too, to get him to do one with us. But how about everybody, another round of applause and a
Thank you.
deep bow to
Thank
our
you.
teacher,
Thank you
Dr.
all.
Catherine Meeks. That was such a beautiful sharing. And I hope
Thank you.
thousands will watch it on YouTube. And
Well, I will be delighted to help share it
very good.
in all of the places where we can share stuff.
Yeah, and I will be in touch with you about that through email and the mail. I'm going to give a commercial announcement and then say goodbye. And Catherine, I'm sure you probably have to go, but you're welcome to stay on for a few minutes with anyone who wants to chat and debrief. Catherine, you don't have to. Sometimes some of us stay on and talk whatever's good. But again, while I've got you all, thank you for being here and supporting this project of ours. especially on behalf of Sharon, Kathy, and Terry, who's here, and Father Ray East on our board, for supporting the Beatitude Center and all these Zooms. Next month, we have Matthew Fox coming on, the great writer and teacher, and he's anxious to be here and talk. And please invite 10 of your friends to join us. And then in December, I think we have the greatest teacher of Thomas Merton coming on, Jonathan Montaldo, for Advent. He's going to talk about Merton and Advent and the idea of prayer as resistance to the culture, which is very interesting. And then, Catherine, you might be interested in this in January, for Martin Luther King's birthday. We have the prestigious author who just had the #1 New York Times best-selling book out, the 1,000-page new biography of Martin Luther King called King a Life, Jonathan Eeg. And he's excited to come onto the Beatitude Center. And I don't want to have another small group, but spread the good word. But he's going to be great. And you might want to get that book and read it before the Zoom. I just launched an action page on the Beatitude Center website. If you go there, you can say, here's concrete things you can do to live out the Beatitudes. And if you have some that you want to suggest, email us and we'll post them. I'll also posted how you can order the discount of the new book, The Gospel of Peace, and my 5-month speaking tour next year. And so we just continue to pray for peace in our world and racial healing for our world and for each other. And a great thanks to you, Catherine, for sharing your wisdom with us. It's a great blessing for all of us and all who will listen. And we wish you all the best. And maybe someday you'll do another Zoom with us, because there's more we have to learn from you. So
I would be honored, and I would wonder if everybody would be willing to imagine with me the Israelis not bombing the Palestinians.
Yeah, let's do that today and continue to pray. So God bless everyone. Have a great day, a great weekend, and we'll keep going forward with the question. And I pray that we'll all choose to be well individually and the collective we that Catherine was talking about. God bless you, Catherine. Everybody, see you all next time. And I'll turn off the recording. And those who wish to stay are welcome to. Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye. Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.